We continue with our discussion on Unit 3 on financial management. In this section, we are going to introduce the concept of options now. So all this while we were looking at futures and forwards as instruments of derivatives. Now we're going to extend our attention to another class of instruments called options. Before we reach there, it's possibly a good idea to just summarize our understanding on what kind of derivative instruments we have seen so far, right? Now, if you look at the types of derivatives, we had discussions on forward commitments so far, which is essentially we are trying to enter into a contract that is going to give us a payoff, or the contract is going to get executed at a future point of time. When I say forward commitment, it's an obligation and it's a commitment that this has to get executed come what may. Regardless of the situation, the contract has to get executed. If the contract is over the counter OTC, then that's an example of forwards that we saw. Swaps at this point of time is not our consideration, so we'll leave that out of consideration, right? But over the counter forward commitment contracts were forwards. Exchange traded contracts were futures, right? These are all forward commitments because once you have entered the contract, you have an obligation to execute it, right? For example, I will buy rice at rupees 90 per kg 1 year from now or 2 months from now. Once we have defined it, it's a commitment, right? Now, there are another kind of derivative instruments that can come up, which are called as contingent claims. What do we mean by contingent claims? Contingent claim basically means that this will work, this will get executed, this will get executed, the contract will get executed if certain conditions are met, right? So it is contingent on those conditions meeting, and that's why it is called as contingent claim. Only if those conditions are met is when this comes in. So for example, one such condition could be if Infosys price goes above 1020, then something gets executed. If the price is below that, it does not get executed. So there is a contract, but the contract only gets executed if certain conditions are met. It is contingent on those conditions meeting to get executed. These instruments, regardless of whether they are exchange traded or OTC, regardless of whether they are exchange traded or over the counter, are known as a class of instrument called as options, right? These options are called options because you have a choice. There is no obligation in this case. There is going to be a choice in this case depending on the condition depending on the condition of the underlying meeting, and that's why it is called as an option. The buyer of this contract has a choice whether or not they want to execute this, right? Let's understand this in detail. First, let's understand the premise and concept of an option. Once we understand the premise and concept of an option, it will become easier for us to kind of comprehend what's happening in contingent plans there. So let's understand this. Options are kind of derivative instruments where the buyer of the option or the holders of the option have a right, but no obligation, right? They have a right, they have a choice, but no obligation to buy or sell an asset, right? Unlike futures, where the buyer and seller of the future enter into a contract for executing, the option, as the name suggests, gives an option to the holder to decide, right? So option to decide whether or not he wants to execute the trade. That's an important premise under options. Let's understand the case of the options using an example from cricket, right? So if you look at our context of futures, let's recreate the context of a scenario that India and Australia are playing a T20 match. India bats first, right? And we are two entities who are betting on the context of what is going to be India's score. This is a 20 over match. So we are saying that India will score above 150 or below 150, right? I'm taking a very simple example to kind of explain the concept of an option and the future. So the future here is nothing but we have basically booked a contract which says that, let's say I say that Infosys will go above 150. Sorry, the score of India will be above 150, and you are saying that the score of India will be below 150, right? In a sense, that's the same as saying that Infosys will go above 1000 or will not go above 1000, right? So technically, this is very similar to a future that we are putting a bet. Remember, we've already said futures are like bets, right? In the case of an option, however, this is not so straightforward. Now, let's say the same match is going on, India is batting, and we have a scenario where where we get into this contract at the price of 150, at the score of 150, right? So let's understand this in a simpler format. Uh, let's say we bet on India scoring 150, right? So we put a bet, and this is what is the time of this bet? This is after toss. So we know that India is batting first, but before India innings, right? That's the timeline. Now, so let's say you say that India will score more than 150. I say India will score less than 150, right? Now the bet is done. Let's for a second assume that we deactivate the bet. When I say deactivate the bet, is before the match we put a bet, but we just deactivate it. We create a contract. So we create a contract which is, let's say, a piece of paper with the contract terms saying that you are saying India will score above 150 and I am saying India will score below 150, right? So we create a contract like this. Now, because you are saying India will score above 150, at this point, let's assume you hold the contract, right? Now, let's say I give you a choice. So you have a choice. Remember, the contract at this point of time is deactivated, which means the bet is there, but the contract is not into existence at this point of time. You are saying India will score above 150. I'm saying India will score below 150, right? Now you have a choice that you can come, you have a choice, and what is that choice? To come after India's innings. You have a choice to come after India's innings and activate the bet. When I say activate the bet, that's essentially execute the bet. Now, let's think about this. You are saying India will score greater than 150, right? Sorry, greater than 150. That's our bet. I am saying India will score less than 150. We put a contract. That contract is available here. I hand over the contract to you. So you fold this paper and put it in your pocket. And I tell you that after India's innings, right? After India's innings, it is your choice to come and activate the bet. So you go away at this point. Now think about it. So we are putting the bet here at time 0, and this is time t, which is India innings is over. Here I'm asking you to come and activate the bet at this point. Now logically, if you have gone away and you hold this contract and this is deactivated, you will only come and activate the bet. When will you come and activate the bet? Is if you win. In other words, if India's score is more than 150, right? So if India's score is greater than 150 is when you're going to come back and say, let's execute the bet now. If India scored 140, what is the point in you coming back to me and saying you win the bet? Because in that case, you will lose money. I am going to make money and I have already given you the choice, right? So the choice is yours. You have this choice whether you want to come after the first innings and activate the bet. Because you have the choice, you will only come if you win. If you don't win the bet, why will you come back? But that doesn't make sense, right? Now you have a very, very strong power in your hands. So I can only lose the bet from here on. I cannot win it because when I win it, I will not see you. You have this contract and that's deactivated at this point of time. The contract will only get activated after the event. Note the point, after the event, if you are winning that. So as a holder of the contract, because you hold the contract, look at some of the keywords here. As a holder of the contract, you have an extreme power in the form of a choice that allows you to activate the bet only if you are winning, right? That's a very big power in your hands. And logically, I shouldn't be giving this power to you for free, because if I give this to you for free, that's a big, big loss for me. So there has to be a payment for this. If I was getting this power, I will have to pay something upfront to you. That's the price of this option. I mean, I can tell you that, why don't you pay me 10 rupees? So we bet on India scoring, deactivate the bet, create the contract, you hold the contract, and you hold the contract at rupees 10. So you pay me rupees 10. In other words, you pay rupees 10 to me for this contract, right? So look at the keywords again. You hold the contract, you have a choice, and you will come back after the event. This is after the event, after India's innings, if you win the bet, right? That is what an option is. In this particular case, you have a choice to execute this option after the event has happened, and that gives you the power as the option holder. I am the option seller, right? I do not have a right. I have an obligation. So if you come to me and you say, I want to execute the bet, I don't have a choice. I have given you the choice. I have given you the choice at a price. That price is rupees 10 in this particular case, argument's sake, right? That's the primary function of an option, that it allows you to create an equation where the holder of the option has the power to come and execute the bet at a later point of time. And the seller of the option does not have any power. The seller is obligated to honor the contract if the holder is winning. Now, if the holder is winning, will only happen when the holder really wins. That's when the holder will come back, right? That's the context of an option. We will replicate the same example now in the case of stocks. Just before that, let's look at the other side of the story as well. We could also turn the entire thing around where you say that India scores less than 150 and I say India scores more than 150. Everything else is exactly the same. We create a contract, you hold the contract, you pay me a price for the contract, pay some money for the contract upfront, right? And execute if you win. Execute if you win. What is your maximum loss in this case? Else lose the money you paid me, right? The money that you paid me. If you lose the contract, if you're losing the bet, you will just leave your 10 rupees. In the earlier case, you paid me 10 rupees to get into a bet that India will score greater than 150, right? So this is me, this is you. I get plus 10, you get minus 10. Now let's say India scores 200. argument's sake, right? We have agreed that we will get into this bet, and the payoff of the bet is exactly like the future, which is the difference. So I have to pay you 50 now. That's because you will come and execute it, right? So in this case, you gain 50, and because it's a zero-sum game, I lose 50. If on the other hand, so in this case, you end up making 40, I end up losing 40, right? We could have another case, earlier case again, where once again you've paid me 10, I have 10. India scores 100. If India scored 100, then in that case, you don't lose any more money. You don't come back to me, and I don't gain any more money, which means I can gain a maximum of 10 rupees from this. You can lose a maximum of 10 rupees from this. You can gain any amount. If India scores 500 for some reason, you make 250 or 350 in this context, right? So eventually you can go up to any point, but your downside is limited. Similarly, on the other side, if India scores less than 150, you will only come back if India scores, let's say, 100, 110 or something. If India scores 160, 170, you will not come back, which means in all these cases, there is a very clear premise of the payoff. And what is that? The payoff says that the option holder, what is the payoff for the option holder? Limited loss. Why limited loss? Because you will only pay that 10 rupees to me, and if you lose, you will not come back to me. And potential of huge gains. You can make 50 rupees by just paying 10, right? At all points of time, the option seller, which is me in this example, will have a limited gain. The maximum I can make is the 10 rupees you paid me. I will not make anything more than that. And I have a potential of large or huge losses, right? That's the payoff that we have. Now we'll come to a later point of what is the motivation behind me getting into this bet, etc. But at this point of time, we are looking at broadly what is the idea of the payoff that is getting created, right? We can replicate the same thing across a stock. Let's say we take Infosys again for our example. We enter into a contract with Infosys. So you are saying that Infy will go above 1050. I am saying that Infy will be below 1050. We enter into a contract with 1050 as the point. You pay me, let's say, 20 bucks. So I make 20, you lose 20. Now at the end of the contract period, now let's say Infy, we are saying after a month. At the end of the contract period, if Infy is at 1100, then you make plus 50, I lose 50. If Infy is at 1000, you don't lose anything else because you don't come back to me, and I don't gain anything, right? So that's the payoff structures that will come up. Logically speaking, you will make money if Infy goes above 150, 1050, and I will lose money above that because I'm saying it'll be below that number. It'll not go above that number, right? So practically when you gain, I lose, and when you don't gain, you don't come back. So the contingent claim comes in the sense that the event will only get executed if Infy actually goes above 1050. Otherwise, it will not come. Now, let's think of what the contract becomes like, right? What you are effectively saying is that you have the choice. Remember, you have choice to buy Infy at 1050, right? Now, why will you buy it at 1050 is only if you believe that the price is above 1050. If the price is below 1050, why will you buy it from me at 1050? And the keyword again being choice. Because you have the choice, you can make money if Infosys goes above 1050. If it is below 1050, you don't come to me to buy it. You can go to the stock market and buy it at 1000, right? So you have the choice to buy Infy at 1050. The exact opposite contract could also be created where you are saying that Infy will go below 1050. Or let's take another stock and discuss it on another stock. Let's say you're saying that we're looking at the stock of Reliance, which today is at a price of 1100, argument's sake. You are saying it will go below 1100, and I am saying it will be above 1100. That's our payoff discussion that we have had, right? And let's say you paid me minus 15 for it, I got plus 15 for it, right? Now, in a sense, what you are saying is that you have the choice to sell Reliance at 1100. You will only make money if it goes below 1100, which means let's say it goes to 1000. You can practically buy in the market at 1000 and sell it to me at 1100, thereby making 100 rupees. Logically, that's the trade that is happening, right? And I will lose 100 rupees. If Reliance goes to 1200, you will not sell it to me at 1100. What's the point of selling it to me at 1100? So you do not execute anything. In which case, you will note that the scenario wise, now you have the choice to sell Reliance at 1100. I have the obligation to buy it if you choose to sell, right? So these are two different contracts. In one case, you are betting on the price going up. In the other case, you are betting on the price going down. And in both the cases, you are the guy who holds the power to execute. I am only going to be obliged to execute the transaction once you come and say, let's execute the transaction, right? That's what an option is. An option is giving you the power to execute a trade at a later point of time by paying a small price, to get into the contract, right? And that's your maximum loss that you can have. You cannot have a loss of more than this amount, right? That's how an option works. Primarily, we'll discuss this more as we go along and it'll become clearer as we go along. Just remember that in this particular case, there are effectively four entities. Let's say there is an entity A and there's an entity B. This guy says Infi will go above 1050. This guy will say it will not go above 1050. They can get into this contract, right? So this guy buys the contract and this guy sells the contract. You have another set of guys, C and D, one who says Infi will go below 1000 and the other who says it will not go below 1000, right? This is the second kind of a contract we saw. In effect, A can buy at 1050, C can sell at 1000. The choice is with A and C. These are the guys who have the choice in this equation. These are the guys who are the sellers of these options, right? So effectively, there are four different kind of entities who can come into play. This will get a little bit confusing, so don't worry about it. When we look at real examples, it will become simpler. For now, just understand that an option gives you effectively the right to get into a bet. It's the choice to get into a bet, right? And that's why it is going to not come for free. This choice is going to cost something, and that's why it's an option that is going to come in, right? Now let's quickly look at some of the key terminologies. In our example, the point of 150 for the cricket match and 1050 for Infosys was what was called as the strike price or exercise price. This is the point at which the option can get exercised. In other words, this is the point or price at which the bet is made. Whatever the bet is, it'll go below, it'll go above, I'll buy or I'll sell, whatever. That's the price. That's called the strike price or exercise price. The spot price is the actual underlying price. Infosys could be trading today at 1030 and we have entered into a contract at 1050. The premium is the price that you pay for the option, right? The 10 rupees that you paid me in the cricket example is the premium, right? An option writer is the entity who sells the option. In our example, I was the option writer. This entity is called to be short the option, right? So someone who's short an option is effectively the option seller, also known as option seller. The option holder is the entity who buys the option. this entity is called long the option. So if you're long an option, you are effectively the buyer. In our case, you were the buyer, you were long the option. I was the seller, I was short the option. These are some of the key terminologies on options that we need to be aware of, right? Now, there are some classifications of options or different kinds of options that come into the picture. Let's look at what are these types of options now. So the first classification of option is something called as call option and put option. Remember, we said you can buy Infosys at 1050. That's a call option. You can effectively call Infosys at 1050. This option gives the buyer of the option a choice or power to buy the underlying asset at a predetermined price, which is called the strike price, right? So you have the choice to buy. The choice to buy is a call option, right? I don't have a choice to sell here. I am obligated to sell if you choose to buy, right? The choice to sell is available in the form of a put option. In our example of Reliance, right? We were saying sell Reliance at 1000. That's called a put option. Because you have the choice to put Reliance at 1000 to someone else. It gives the buyer of the option a choice to sell the underlying asset. So you have to buy the contract to get the choice to sell. In other words, a call option is a choice to buy. A put option is a choice to sell, right? The entity, this is only the choice for the buyer of these options. For the seller of these options, it's obligation to sell or buy whatever is the counterparty scenario, right? So in our case, if you were betting on India scoring more than 150, that was a call option. If you were betting on India scoring less than 150, that was a put option effectively. If you're betting on Infosys going above a certain price, you'll probably go and buy a call option. If you're betting on Infosys going below a certain price, you'll buy a put option. Why would I get into option selling? We will get to that in a moment, right? But that's what a call option and a put option is effectively. So that's the first classification of options. There's another classification just for our understanding, not really necessary for us to kind of get into this detail at this point of time. An option that can be exercised on any day leading up to the expiry is called an American option. So if Infosys price today is 1000, we have a contract that at the end of 1 month, if the price is 10, as at the end of 1 month, if the price is 1050, you can effectively execute it. If tomorrow the price goes to 1060 and you can exercise the contract there, if the price is 1060, you can buy at 1050 and sell at 1060, thereby making a profit of 10. If the choice of execution is available on any day leading up to the expiry day is the contract period, 1 month, then that's called an American option. There are some options which can only be exercised on the last day, which is I will see only after 1 month, exactly after a month is where we will check what's happening to the price of Infosys. That's called a European option. Now, a discussion on this beyond this at this point of time is not necessary. Once again, something that will probably get covered in your discussion on derivatives when we move there, in your subject on derivatives at a later stage. For now, we just need to understand the nomenclature, that there's something called as an American option and there's something called as a European option. These are the types of options that are available for us, right? That's a basic understanding of options. In our next segment, we're going to look at payoff structures and how do we arrive at broad charts for payoffs. So who makes what when they are buying or selling an option? We'll just look at that in more detail.